I was house sitting for my grandma one weekend while she traveled to Florida with her church friends. Sleeping in the guest bedroom, I occupied the bed next to the window. This room had 2 twin beds, where my brother and I often slept during our visits. Before settling in, I made sure to check that all the doors were locked. Once in bed, I found it was still early, and I didn't fall asleep right away. There wasn't much to do at my grandma's house, so I spent an hour on my phone, watching videos, and texting friends. That's when I started to hear a woman's voice outside, calling out hello. Curious, I quietly left the bedroom and inched closer to the front door, listening carefully. The voice repeated hello every 10 seconds. As I approached the door, I realized it was coming from outside. My grandma's door didn't have a peephole, but the dining room windows provided a clear view of the front porch. I decided to peek through the blinds discreetly. To my shock, I saw an older woman standing on the stoop, looking right at me, as if she knew I'd look out. With an unnerving smile, she repeated hello. This woman appeared to be in her late 50s or early 60s, and something about her face made me uneasy. I stepped away from the window, wondering if she was one of my grandma's friends. But it was midnight. Who would come by at that hour? Why wasn't she knocking or ringing the bell? Feeling unsettled, I returned to the guest bedroom and firmly shut the door. With the door closed, I couldn't hear her anymore, but I was left wondering who she was and why she was there. I began texting my sisters and friends about the bizarre encounter. After a while, the silence allowed me to calm down, though my sisters suggested calling Grandma. I knew she'd likely be asleep and rarely checked her phone. Just then, a loud banging erupted at the window, not knocking, but a fierce bang. A wave of panic surged through me, activating my fight-or-flight response. The banging stopped, but I heard that same voice say, hello. With adrenaline rushing, I swiftly grabbed the blinds and pushed them up, only to find myself face to face with that terrifying woman. It felt like mere glass separated us. I screamed at her twisted smile, "I'm calling the cops." I let the blinds fall and sprinted to the living room. Feeling frantic, I looked around the house before retreating upstairs, locking myself in the guest bedroom. I really didn't want to call the police, possibly out of fear or denial. I crawled into bed, wrapping myself tightly in the covers. Hours later, still awake, I finally ventured back downstairs to check the windows. To my relief, the creepy old lady had vanished. The next morning, I called my grandma to tell her what had happened. She panicked and yelled into the phone, distressed. She revealed that days earlier, a younger woman had been watching her in the grocery store, smiling for no reason. I tried to calm her down, unsure if both events correlated. My grandma is 75 and has experienced forgetfulness, so I typically take her stories with caution. Yet, the urgency in her voice sent chills down my spine. I wondered if it could have been the same woman. My name is Nicholas, a freshman at Syracuse University, situated in a neighborhood that doesn't always feel safe. Recently, I went through a breakup and turned to online dating to distract myself. While using Hinge, I connected with a blonde girl named Stephanie, who also attended Syracuse. We shared interests in reading and movies and had a similar sense of humor. Excited, I asked her out for a movie date, and she eagerly agreed. She asked me to meet her at a location near campus, promising to pick me up. Around 9 p.m., I waited on a corner of a quiet block for Stephanie. She asked me to share my location via text, so I did. A few minutes later, a car pulled up, and the driver rolled down the window. It wasn't Stephanie, it was an older man asking what I was doing alone. His question struck me as odd. I explained I was waiting for someone. Then he asked if I was waiting for Stephanie. Confused, I replied yes. He claimed to be Stephanie's father and invited me to hop in for the ride. At a glance, he seemed a little too old to be her father. I firmly asked why he hadn't mentioned picking me up beforehand. He replied that he didn't trust a random guy meeting his daughter and wanted to meet me first. I glanced at him again and chose not to engage, simply walking away in the opposite direction. He called out, surprised by my decision to leave. My mind raced with thoughts of kidnapping stories I had heard before. I turned back, ensuring he didn't follow, and felt relieved when he drove straight and turned left. Continuing down the block toward campus, I approached the corner when I noticed the same car parked with its lights off. I casually glanced at the window, but the glass was heavily tinted. Trying to remain calm, I ignored my instincts and walked on. Suddenly, I received a text from the so-called Stephanie, asking why I hadn't gotten in the car with her dad. Ignoring her, I kept walking. As I neared the intersection, I turned right and quickened my pace toward campus. Strangely, I felt no one was following me. Out of breath, I arrived at my dorm but heard footsteps behind me. Thinking I was being paranoid, I noticed broken glass under someone's shoe. I ducked behind a van to listen. The footsteps were a few cars away, and then I remembered I never stopped sharing my location with Stephanie, or rather, that man. I caught sight of him approaching, yelling for me to come back and that he would take me to her. He appeared to be in his 60s, and I knew I could outrun him if I sprinted. I bolted toward my dorm, easily losing him in the process. Once inside, I found my roommate was out. Alone, I laid down, trying to process everything. Suddenly, I received another text from that man. It shocked me. It read, "You're lucky you got away. I would have strangled your ugly ass." I saved the screenshot and replied, "Thanks for the threat. It's going straight to the police," then blocked his number. I intend to use that conversation as evidence when I eventually report the incident. When I was 18, I worked part-time as a janitor at my high school. Over the summer, my shifts varied, and I frequently closed up the building alone when the older janitors had left. One night, my supervisor, Tom, left early, meaning I would finish up by myself. He instructed me to text him if I needed anything, as was our routine. I enjoyed those shifts alone since it often allowed me to slack off. Before departing, Tom asked me to bring the extra gym seats to the basement storage room. I grabbed a stack of 6 chairs and headed down. The basement was dimly lit and felt more like a warehouse than a school. Several art mannequins were covered in paint cloths, which housed all the school's supplies. After dropping off the chairs, I returned to the gym for more. Upon descending again with more chairs, I noticed one of the mannequins was now uncovered. Surprised, I texted Tom, expressing my concern that someone might be in the basement. He texted back, asking for clarification. I pointed out the cloth hiding something in the corner. After a minute, he replied that no one else should be there. I cautiously approached the fabric, realizing whatever was underneath was moving slightly. Terrified, I dashed upstairs and locked the basement door, texting Tom again about my discovery. His response was to call the police, but I insisted he should come back, knowing he had just left. He refused, suggesting I confront whoever was there. Reluctantly, I returned to the basement, yet the cloth was now flat on the floor, indicating whoever hid beneath had escaped. Then, the scariest moment occurred. Loud metallic thumps echoed from above. I looked up to see indents forming in the air vents, as if someone was crawling through. They stopped right above me, and the banging intensified, as if someone was attempting to break through. Overwhelmed by fear, I abandoned everything, bolted up the stairs, locked the doors, and hurried home. The following day, I told Tom only part of the story. I mentioned that I thought I saw someone hiding, but they were gone when I returned. Ultimately, there was nothing more I could say. It was my last week there, and I didn't feel the need to pursue it any further.